All right, what is up, my peeps? Joshua Smith here with another GSD interview. Every single week, we interview top entrepreneurs and just straight up top badasses out there dominating their space. These are people choosing to not live a life of mediocrity, but instead to go out there and create epic, amazing lives for themselves and their families. So today, you guys, we had a very special guest on the show. Guy I'm really excited to have on the show. Top entrepreneur, top coach, best-selling author. I mean, this is a gentleman that goes out there and helps entrepreneurs go out there and create epic, amazing businesses and lives for themselves. So this is the coach to the coaches, right? So I'm really excited, you guys, to have Dirk Van Loon on the show. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hello, I'm glad to be on your show. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. So, and I appreciate you making the time. I know it's early where I am and it's very late where you are. So I appreciate you making this happen. So, you know, I know you, man. You got so much going on. You know, you've got an amazing book that you've published, and you do a lot of coaching, speaking. You know, you're a massive influencer in the entrepreneur space. But before we dive into what you're doing, I'm really interested on your own personal journey. Like, rewind the clocks, whether that's, you know, high school, university, like what led you personally to becoming an entrepreneur?
Actually, I did finish my school at the 21 years ago, and I did start just in the corporate world like everyone else. So, but after 10 years, I did make the decision to be self-employed. So moved to the direction of entrepreneurial side, because I was convinced I could do at least the same like the other entrepreneurs. So together with my years of experience of working corporate environment, I decided to move on to advise and coach and lead transformation projects in the corporate world on with my own company. So that's let's say the major shift. Let's say 11 years ago. So and after this, the last 10 years, did serve a lot of corporate organizations like Nike, Atlas Copco, and other major multinationals. And during this time, I did keep some records of about my experiences along the go. So and after 10 years, I did collect a lot of let's say one pages of best practices, things is worth to share with the audience. I did decide to write my own book about my own experience.
Yep, I love it. So when you're in the corporate world, because like you said, like everybody else, you know, we're kind of conditioned to take this path where you go to college, you go to university, then you get in this corporate world, and but it sounded like you had a really good gig there, really good corporate job. What really sparked that change? I mean, were your parents entrepreneurial, or were you just really just dissatisfied with that job? Like, I mean, what made you make that decision after 10 years to, hey, I'm going to leave this and go on my own?
Actually, I'm not having this entrepreneurial skill from my parents at all, because my mother was a housewife, so my father was teacher, so on the government side. So my brother and sister are also teachers, so we are not a family about entrepreneurial. So and they were really skeptic about my move, because I was leaving my corporate job, well paid, with a lot of benefits and so on. So they were, let's say, not so happy with my decision. So, but the reason why I did make this shift 12 years ago was because I saw a lot of different people passing the corporate world, a lot of entrepreneurial consultants from the Big Four and other consulting companies. And I was convinced that I could do at least the same or even better than these consultants.
Yep.
And share my own practices and get the things done, and not only do the theoretical part, but also put it in practice. Because a lot of consulting companies stop with a nice presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, and don't put everything that what they preach in practice. So I did want to make the difference to put everything in practice as well.
So when you 12 years ago, when you made that transition, right? Because a lot of times we might have the skill sets of our craft that we learn with the corporate world or whatever, when we're making that transition. And then sometimes we realize, wow, there's a lot more to being an entrepreneur than maybe we knew. It's not just doing the work that we're doing. Then we have, we got to market ourselves. You got payroll. You got all these other things. When you made this transition, what were some of the things that maybe you were surprised or shocked that were challenges you had to overcome that you weren't expecting?
The biggest challenge is the administration in Belgium. We have a lot of administration to do to run your own company. So it's a huge barrier to start be entrepreneurial. So that's the first one. The second one, it's the mid-sized companies are not so eager to hire consultants, freelance consultants or experts. So that's only incorporated in the bigger companies, but in the smaller, mid-sized companies between 50 and 500 employees, it's not so common in Belgium yet, or at least in Europe. So it's pretty hard to gain some credit and so buy-in in the different organizations. So that was the biggest challenge for me.
Yeah. So okay. So then let's talk about the book, right? So then you decided to write your book, The Secret of Influence, and because things are so much different today than kind of the way that we've been conditioned of your old school companies. And I know you talk a lot about this of your typical companies that have your different hierarchies and different things there. And today's world is just different. When you look at some of these great companies like Zappos or Facebook or Amazon, they're doing things totally different. So what inspired you to write the book personally?
My personal motivation was to share my own best practices to the audience, because there are a lot of books already out and really good books about influence and relate to this topic, but most of the time they are really theoretical approach. They don't are really practical guides to put in practice in your daily life. When you read your book or get some nice seminar, it's okay, it's really obvious and it's common sense, yes, but putting this really in practice, it's harder to do that. So the intention was to get a more practical guide for everyone day in, day out, and not only for the high top achievers, but also just for your normal life, for inside your own family, children, your direct environment. So it's the intention to have a book not only for the corporate world, but also for the personal world. So it's a combination of.
Yeah, so we're in this I don't want to say odd time. I mean, it's a pretty amazing, brilliant time, to really be in business and be alive because of with technology that exists today, but things it's just a different world. You've got all these companies made up of it's less and less bricks and mortar. It's more virtual. It's you're having to inspect what you expect in different manners. And what are some of the transitions that you're seeing? Because you work with a lot of great companies, and maybe before you started working with them, they weren't so great, right? And you're able to help them. So as we enter 2017, what are some of these key things that you see that businesses need to shift to that maybe the great businesses have already figured out?
The biggest shift that we see nowadays, let's say the last 10 years already, before that's really hierarchical based, really top-down steering of the company. And what we see now, the most people don't accept it anymore. To have a direct control, direct steering of the people. It has to be come more from the people itself, and it's more completely different kind of leadership that we expect from our current companies. If you compare with, let's say, the classical bank environment, it's really top-down structure that we have, but they are facing a lot of the big challenges nowadays because they will not be able to compete to the new organizations like the Google and the Apples. So because they have a completely different way of leading and directing their organization. So the way of leadership is shifting completely. It's not. It's more about influencing, building your own networks inside the company to enable everyone to build on the same vision in the place of really directing your vision top down. So that's the biggest shift that we see nowadays. And the bigger companies like the Facebook, the Teslas, and so on, they are really moving, already acting on this way. And a lot of, let's say, big companies, the banks and the other major organizations face really difficulties to compete with these. So.
Yep. Well, and what's really cool about it and what you see about it is, like not too long ago, I was able to go out there and do a tour with Zappos, and when you see the culture and how they operate and what they do, I mean, they're attracting so much talent at far less pay than what these people can go get elsewhere. People really aren't always driven by pay. There's so many other things that are driven. So with that being said, most entrepreneurs aren't your big, massive companies like obviously a Google or a Facebook or any of those sorts. They're, so we've got a lot of people that are listening to this right now that, maybe they're either they're just starting their business and they have a couple people, or maybe they have 20 people, or when you're starting out, right? How do you start out the correct way to make sure that you're growing, having that culture and having that organization in that way?
That's a good question, and I don't think it is a one-to-one answer on that. So it's according to my opinion, it's if you can surround yourself with a lot of experts of like-minded persons, you will be able to create a nice organization or a nice network to make the difference to start up a nice corporate solution. So it don't have to be the classical approach about stating your business plan, your vision, your mission. Okay, that's important for sure, but it's really, let's say, corporate approach. But when you start more from entrepreneurial, small startup minded, as we see nowadays, they surround each other with like-minded persons with different skill sets, and they make them stronger together. And it's more kind of network organization in place of just a solid organization. It's more fluid. It's not a fixed organization structure anymore, because you have to shift so fast in the different topics, and you need so many different expertise during your journey. So you have to be really flexible to move forward on that, and that's what I see. It's the future of the new organizations.
Yeah. So with that being based, and I couldn't agree more. It seems like so much of the hierarchy based is more ego based than like people need to feel like they have certain power, and it's just people just don't have tolerance for egos anymore. But then what's the fine line? Because you can see. Like you still have to inspect what you expect. You still have to hold people accountable. How do you when you're working with these great companies that do this? How do they give people that freedom? Keep it where it's a safe environment for people to be open and create that culture, but also make sure that hey, we got accountability or people have deadlines. I mean, there's still commitments that people need to make.
Yeah, how the line is really difficult to. It's really difficult to put a line on this. So it's a matter of giving and taking in the organization, and it's from the owners to the employees. It's the same. It's a kind of mutual trust you're building during your journey, and building up some credit on both sides. And it's really, in a small organization, it's really easy to do that. It's more easy, let's say so, if you stay below the 100 employees. But when you go bigger organizations, like in Google, like you mentioned, Facebook, it's getting really challenging. And it's really setting a really strong corporate culture. And that's a really tough one to keep that, because for the moment you're getting really big, it's always some people, they are abusing the system. But at the end of the road, when the culture mindset is correct, your colleagues don't allow to make abuse of the system. So it's a kind of more culture-driven organizations mindset than the financial-driven mindset.
Yep. So, and culture gets thrown around so much, right? And I agree. I mean, it's so important. It's so critical. For somebody that maybe is like, man, that's where we suffer. We really don't have that great culture. We really don't know what our company stands for, what we're all about. when you're working with a new client that maybe is in that position, and I know, I mean, these are, you're spending hours and hours and hours and months and with your clients on this stuff. But what are some suggestions that you give some people to start? Maybe they're listening to this and they're like, man, our culture just sucks, right? We don't really we don't really know what we stand for as a company. What's some maybe advice that you would give them so they can start to self-discover that?
Actually, the biggest challenge what I do see nowadays, and I always make a joke about it, we are nowadays in a communication society, and it's one thing that we're not doing is communicating anymore. So the biggest challenge is to communicate on organization level. And a lot of people think everything is common sense, but it's not common practice. It's a lot of things are going on in the organization, but the most people are leaders and on managerial level. They don't pay attention how the information is flowing down to the organization, and also communication going up from top down, from bottom up to the top. So this communication flows, it's really a big challenge nowadays. A lot of companies are struggling with how to organize their communication, a way of communicating with their employees, top down, bottom up, but also with their clients, because the difference between the employees and your clients is getting really small. It's even smaller and smaller nowadays. So it's communication. It's the biggest challenge in the current society and current business world.
Yeah, so when you're talking about getting communication or getting feedback from the bottom up, I'm definitely not a big company, but we have over 100 people that between our ventures that work for us with that, and sometimes I feel like you got to hear certain things from other people, and you try to make it a safe environment for everybody to be open and give you their feedback. How do you recommend companies or leaders to do that, as far as how can we get people that are maybe entry level, whatever it may be, give them a safe place and the freedom to be able to communicate what their wants are, what their needs are, because maybe they're freaked out. If they're sitting with you face by face, as much as you try to communicate this is a safe place, maybe they really don't feel like it is. I mean, is there any types of feedback loops that you recommend? Surveys that you do that are nameless, or whatever, where people can have that open, safe conversations?
The first moment I do enter an organization, most of the time, I do a small survey to get a more feeling of what's going on in the organization. And then from that moment, you get already really fast feedback. And the most employees do expect communication top down. They expect from their leaders, the management, the CEO, that they are communicating more and more often and more complete. But if you ask the question the way around, what communication would you like to provide to the organization, then most of the time you get no answer. It becomes really quiet. So, and that's a lot of people are struggling with that. So there are a lot of complaining of remarks on the communication inside the organization from top down, that they're missing of a lack of communication. But bottom up, it's always a really challenge. And that's depending on which culture that you're working. So if you work for a Belgian company or an American company, it's completely different what the outcome of this kind of survey is. And let's say the first step of the first quick wins that I do have most of the time is just have some small workshops with the people on the work floor to get some inputs and get some small standalones, own driven work groups that they facilitate and get ownership of their own communication topics, so that they have to push off formulate some own solutions to the management without involvement of the management. And that is what I see. That's a really nice results on that, but it's really difficult for the management to accept this, because they don't have control anymore about the communication, and that's a barrier that I see nowadays as well. So it's more a kind of facilitating from the employees to push the communication upwards, in place of only communication downwards for the organization.
Yeah, love it. So that's kind of, you said that was the biggest challenge that you're seeing with a lot of companies today, or maybe their biggest vice, if you will, with that. As we move into 2017, I've heard, and again, this is all just theory predictions, but things like, for example, Walmart. We may see Walmart go out of business in the next 15 years because of all the bricks and mortar. They can't compete with like an Amazon who's at your doorstep in 2 hours via drone. Right? So what are some other things outside of that you see, or maybe another one or two things that you see if companies today aren't making the transition to that they're going to probably become extinct, with this changing deindustrialized global economy that we're entering, if you will.
Do you mean what kind of business are we going out of business if we don't change?
Yeah. I mean, just some trends that you're seeing. I mean, because we're seeing. A lot of people, maybe that more of a virtual aspect or whatever that may be with their employees, just things that overall big shifts that you think companies need to be making in the next few years.
Actually, the biggest shift that I see, at least on our side, it's the banking and insurance environment. There are, let's say, still a lot of local business based. They are really stuck on their own agencies. If they are not shifting to the internet, online in the virtual world, they will lose their business because the Amazons and Alibabas, the Apple Pay and so on, they are coming up, and they can have much more data, much more capabilities to serve the people better than the current bank environment. So it's a kind of moving to a more data-driven business than the classical face-to-face business. Yep. That's what I see. It's a lot of the business is data-driven. What we can see with all the data gathering, it's done by the big companies, and then with data mining solutions, you can make a huge difference. You don't have to don't have the physical office anymore. So, and that will be really challenging for a lot of businesses, not only for the bank and insurance environment, to compete with this kind of, let's say, internet business coming up nowadays. And also the virtual part. A lot of people are moving to a more virtual assistance and not anymore physical interaction. So the current, the younger generations do prefer that already. But okay, it's still some, the baby boom generation has some difficulties with that, but it's fading away, of course. And that will be, let's say, a huge mind shift. So you are doing business all around the world. You are interacting with your bank agent on the other side of the world. So even with your local bank agency around the corner. So that's the biggest shift what I see.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. It's one of those things where I can't even think of the last time I went to the bank. Right? I have an app on my phone. I take a picture of my check. They deposit it through this app, and all online bill pay, and it's crazy. So I couldn't agree more. Yeah. So when it comes to, let's talk about the employee side. Right? Because there's, for example, right now there's like 2.4 billion millennials, but there's not 2.4 billion jobs, if you will. And you talked about a lot of companies now going out there and hiring virtual assistants or contractors, if you will, because then they're not having to pay taxes, insurance, and doing a lot more contract labor like that. What kind of recommendations would you give? Like if you were talking to like a 16-year-old kid right now, right? Like what type of skill sets should they be learning to make themselves more valuable to the marketplace with these changes? Because jobs are becoming scarce, right? And our typical colleges aren't preparing these young kids for the real world that exists out there in the employment space.
Actually, and that's a really, really nice question, because I do have two children, and I always say to them, I hope that you can master a lot of languages, because it's getting really important. Okay, English, Chinese, and so on. So Portuguese, Spanish. So That's getting really important. So you express yourself in different languages, and also to be eager to learn. But not only not learning technical skills, but it's about technical skills that can be mastered by artificial intelligence. Okay, today is really in the baby steps that they're making, but if you go 10, 15 years further on, they will replace a lot of, let's say, technical jobs already. So the focus will more be the people will be the glue between all these processes and all these solutions. So it's more the people side, the interaction, the soft elements that you have to master to make a difference, to stay competitive, have a market value on the business world.
Yeah, and I love that you bring up, all those points and the eagerness to learn. The statistic is like your average college student reads one book for the rest of their life after graduating college. We get the stigma that, we've got a degree, now we can just stop learning, and it just doesn't cut it, right? So speaking of that, for yourself, right? Because not only do you have to go out there and you've got to personally stay way ahead of the curve, because you're the, you got to, like Wayne Gretzky, the great hockey player said, I don't skate where the puck is, I skate to where it's going. So have to know trends with your consulting companies of not just where we need to be, but also where we need to platform, plan for, and go. So what does your own personal self-development look like to make sure that you are ahead of the game for your clients?
It's a big challenge for me as well. So I'm not, let's say, I don't have everything planned in advance on that, because like you mentioned, we are all on the same wave, and we have to look out where it's going, of course. And I do read a lot of books, actually, and from my colleagues, competitors, other insights, other visions. And not always agree with the different visions, but just to enrich your own vision, to see how it's evolving, and this together with your own best practices of your own experience from the business world. I make my own pattern in this. So and that's the reason that I did more focus more on the soft side, on the people side of change, of guiding, of leading transition, guiding the companies in their transition from, let's say, from almost one physical environment to another environment, another way of doing business, the digital transformation. And you can do this with a lot of technical things and a lot of experts on the market for that, no question about that. But it's the people side, the change, handling the change. That's what I see the biggest struggle actually nowadays. And that's the reason I'm more focusing on that angle the last 5, 6, 7 years. But if you ask me the same question 15 years ago, I was more focused on the technical part. So depending on what I see, what according to my feeling, what I see, what the need is on the market, I do reorientate myself as well. So you have to be flexible, because otherwise you are out of market in no time. So.
Yeah, and with us, if we're not changing, if we're not adapting, we're dying, right? So how do you, and I know that this is a very difficult, very loaded question here, but when it comes to, okay, if I'm a leader of the company, I might be, hey, I'm willing to change and adapt. But sometimes it can be very difficult to get your people to change and adapt at the speed that we all need to change and adapt. And I know that that's what you really focus on today, is focusing on those people skills. But how do you get that? Do you just realize that some of these people won't change and adapt and they're the wrong people? Or how do you communicate that to your organization? Because more so, we got to change and adapt faster than we ever have in today's marketplace.
Indeed, that is a really big challenge that I faced nowadays with any even smaller transitions, because the most people are changed at first, so they are afraid of any way of changing. From the moment that they are pulling out of their comfort zone, they start panicking. So, and that's really, let's say, difficult. And the first stage on this is creating awareness to the person. So what's the really reason and the real cause of why we have to change? It's just a matter of surviving in your organization. And if you can create a sense of urgency and to get people aware of the sense of urgency, is really important. And that's the biggest major step you have to take before moving forward. Because you don't have a sense of urgency on every level, it will be really difficult to get a sustainable change and to get everyone on board during your change transition.
Yep, love it. So for you personally, because we find that good becomes the worst enemy to greatness very quickly, right? So we see a lot of people that settle for good enough, and they just quit. Life becomes pretty good, and they just kind of start coasting. And what keeps you personally, Dirk, leveling up, not accepting good enough, but always going for greatness for your own self personally?
Well, personally, I'm now 41 years old, and the last, 20 years after finishing my bachelor and master degree, I did study more than ever. So it's an ongoing journey, and generate some energy for me to keep on developing and to keep on building some experience and knowledge from different angles. And the more that I do read and study and following courses of seminars, the more I become aware that I just know just a little, and just this gives me a drive to keep on exploring the different environments, the different topics, different angles of doing business. So.
Yep, love it. So when it comes to that with your self-development, always learning, because we're in this age right now where I don't want to say there's too much information out there, but man, I mean, there is a lot, right? Like you can't read it all, you can't study all these things. How do you make sure that you're studying the right things? Like, do you have a process that you go through to make sure that you're focused on reading the right books and, going to the right seminars or whatever that may be?
Actually, it's not, let's say, I do use a matrix of whatever to define which seminar, which book I do read. So I do rely on a lot of other experts, the advice sometimes to other books, the other seminars, the colleagues, and I just do just some small cross checks on that. So, okay, is this really what I want, what I'm looking for? And sometimes it's totally not the case. I leave it aside. In other moments, I will go really deep on the other personal experiences. So it's more kind of the network that I'm building during the times and the feedback and expertise I gather from other people that I make a decision how to move forward or what books I want to read. So.
Yep, love it. So,
because there is no exact science on that. So it's.
Yeah.
There are so many books out and a lot of same topics, but every book is approaching some topics, same topics on a completely different approach, and that gives you some completely different insight. So, and that makes it really interesting sometimes.
Yeah, and the reason I ask is because, I think we all get a lot of different recommendations. And I'll have somebody that will be like, oh man, you got to read this book, it was amazing. And then I'll ask them, I was like, okay, well, what was your favorite thing about it? How did you apply it to your life? And how has it impacted you? And they kind of look at you like a deer in the headlights, right? Like some of you are just getting through books, they're not getting from them. And, and it's a big investment of our life. I just think it's important to make sure that we are reading the right books if we're able to, right? So, love it. So, as far as your book, Dirk, and then the best way to get a hold of you, what is the best place to go learn more about your book, to get your book? And we'll, of course, have a link below those you watch and listen, so you can go get Dirk's book right now. But if somebody wants to, learn more about you, about what your consulting services does, or what's the best way to get a hold of you?
And the best way, just go www.dirkvanloon.com. Or for the book is thesecretofinfluence.com. You will be redirected to the site as well, and you can get the book on Amazon.com as well. So it's it's completely self-publishing, only via Amazon nowadays. So it's a pretty common marketplace. So that's the reason why I did choose for that.
So and then speaking of the books and making sure it's the right book for those, who would you say your book is for, so they would know if, hey man, this is a book that would be for me that I really need to check out.
Actually, that's one of the first questions I did had from from the moment I started marketing my book. What's your audience? And actually, I do a really broad audience. It's from, I always say, from 21, 21st year till 65. And even it's even broader than that, because it's not only applicable for your business environment. Being influential, master the skill of being influential, it's in kind of technique. You can master it just practicing some techniques, what I do describe in my book. It's not only applicable in the business environment, but also for your wife, your parents, your children, your friends, and so on. So it's actually applicable for everyone that want to get some influence on our society. So on even a smaller level or even a big level. So. Yeah. It's a pretty broad audience without a lot of management talk, really down to earth and easy read to get some nice tools that you can put to practice directly without studying, rereading the book to get a better understanding of that. So.
Yep, no, I love it. It's like Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yes.
With that book,
great book.
Yeah, and it's applied to as much, if not more, in my personal life than it has in business, and I guess yours is kind of like the modern day version of that in the year that we're in. So, love it. Yes. So I started this podcast because I wanted to go out there and give, because there's so much information out there, and there's a lot of these quote-unquote gurus that we find have never done it, and things like that. So I wanted to go out there and create a place where we interview the doers, guys like yourself that are in the trenches, that are actually doing this. It's not theory, it's actual strategy, to give back to those, to our listeners, for them to go out there and learn. And of course, on a selfish point, I get to pick brilliant minds like yours all day, so it's great for my own self-development as well. So with that being said, anybody that's watching and listening to this right now, do you have any last words of maybe inspiration or advice that you'd like to leave them with so they can go out there and create the life they know they want and deserve?
Actually, I did a acronym for that. And what I do with that, it's just lead your own life in all dimensions. And the L is for standing for live in the moment, be present when you're communicating with some person, of interacting, be completely present over there. Just have a really face-to-face communication. Be in the moment. Don't make your grocery list while you're talking or the other person is talking. Just be there. And the E is for the energy. Just be buoyant, be enthusiastic, be alive in the moment, because life is too short to let everything go, just go with the flow. No, make the difference in that, because when you have more energy, you will be more appealing to everyone. The atmosphere will be a lot lighter and more buoyant, a lot more pleasant on that. So, and the E is for acceptance. Just accept, acknowledge the other persons, just appreciate the other person. So in their way of doing, they will doing a great job, how they make the difference, just to appreciate, acknowledge what they are doing. Just give them small compliments day in, day out. We don't do this enough nowadays. And from the moment you give compliments, you lift up everyone directly. Even with small, tiny things. And the D's, just develop these three things on a consistent basis. Just live in the moment, be buoyant, enthusiastic in the moment, and appreciate everyone around you more often. And you will see a difference in no time. And that's the only thing I want to give. That's the key message I want to give with my book as well. Just live in the moment, energize, and appreciate everyone. And then in 30 days, you will see a huge difference already in your direct environment.
Yep, love it. Powerful words. And to those watching, listening, you guys, we're going to have a link right below to Dirk's website and the book, so you can go out there and get the book right away. Highly recommend that you guys do. I know in every single podcast with this, information without implementation is just the start of delusion. Information's not power. It's taking that information, taking action on it, that creates power in your world. So Dirk shared so many amazing pieces of advice with you guys today. take something that he shared with you and go out there and apply it immediately in your life. And like I said, take action on getting his book right now. And Dirk, man, I know how busy you are. This has been a massive honor having you on the show. Truly appreciate you taking time. Very busy to be here.
Thank you very much also for being on your show as well. So.
Yeah, huge honor. Really appreciate it. And those, again, watching and listening, thank you guys so much, and we will see you next time.